This case is a rare example of actual undue influence in contract law, and it also highlights how the law can sometimes operate awkwardly in a multicultural environment. Mrs. Sadiq and Mr. Rizwan Khan had agreed to sell a Sydney property to Shikanda and Farisha Khan. Under Australian law, the sale of a house or land is one of the few types of contract that must be in writing. In this case, however, the initial agreement was oral and so not legally binding. Later, there were negotiations about whether some price adjustments were necessary. Mrs. Sadiq was offended by some of those negotiations and no longer wanted to sell. A meeting was held in order to resolve the dispute and also to record the agreement in writing. All of the parties were Muslims, and Mufti Naeem Ali, the local imam, was asked to attend the meeting as a mediator and honest broker. There's no suggestion that he ever had a personal stake in the deal. At the meeting, Mrs. Farik maintained that she would not sign. The Mufti read several verses from Muslim holy writing that indicated the importance of honouring agreements that had been made orally. He said that if Mrs. Farik went through with the deal, then she would be rewarded in the afterlife, presumably because she would have obeyed the necessary rules of her religion. Mrs. Farik told the court that she was worried and even scared after hearing this advice, but she signed the contract. The court was asked to set the contract aside due to undue influence, and the court found that the imam's statements represented a religious instruction, or at the least a religious exhortation to do something she was not legally obliged to do, did not wish to do, and had actively resisted doing. Written documents were drawn up and signed on the spot. The Mufti was a witness. The court found that the buyers have not attempted to show that they did not take advantage of Mrs. Sadiq's obedience to Mufti Naeem. The bargain under which they received a benefit from Mrs. Sadiq is therefore one which equity regards as unconscionable and will not allow to be enforced against Mrs. Sadiq. The contract was set aside due to undue influence and was not enforceable. Mrs. Sadiq's signature reflected the influence she was under and not her agreement to the contract.